Hi, everyone. Welcome to tonight's special event with Grant Abbott. My name is Mary Jane. I'm the SMSF Setup Head Team Leader at Freedom FFS, and where I think most of you have come from this evening. A lot of our clients I can see are joining us tonight, which is very exciting. For those who'll be watching the recording later, it is Wednesday, the 7th of May, 2025 at 7 p.m. So this meeting is being recorded. Participants won't be able to ask questions verbally, but you can put things in the chat. We do have 100 and something plus people expected to join, possibly 200. For focusing this evening on these 10 power moves to save tax and build for your retirement via an SMSF, Grant will be the one primarily presenting. So who is Grant? This is a great question. We've known, or Cass has certainly known Grant for many years. He's given more than 2,000 presentations and training sessions on a variety of subjects in the financial services field, but specifically on self-managed super funds, SMSFs. He's actually authored 5 books on SMSFs. One is very famous with a gold cover called The Guru's Guide to SMSFs. And he's actually recently been there it is, fantastic. And he's recently been powering through a very important emerging field, which is succession, asset protection and estate planning, to make sure that the wealth you build throughout your lifetime is protected for generations to come through your legacy. But tonight so Grant's got qualifications as long as your arm, as long as Cass does. We're hoping that Cass will jump on tonight just to say hi. She does have another appointment, unfortunately. But tonight's all about Grant sharing his great insights to help all of our clients and more. So without further ado, Grant, welcome.
Oh, thank you very much, Mary Jane. It's great. How did you go with the heart party? Did you get a few votes?
Oh, we did. My target was 100 votes, and I did 10 times that. So I'm a
Oh,
winner.
fantastic.
And we distributed something like 30,000 flyers. So our aim was to get a little bit of information into the hands of everyday men and women. So we achieved that for sure.
Yeah, so I think if you have a look at what's coming down the track, obviously that $3 million unrealized gain. So if anyone impacted by that, then just make sure you book an appointment with Mary Jane, and I've got about 5 or 6 solutions around that one. So let's get going. We've got a lot to cover, a lot of wood to chop.
Grant, I just wanted to introduce our clients to you.
Yep, sure.
You don't necessarily know them. A lot of our clients are new to self-managed super funds. Like many people in the last couple of years, they've suddenly been awakened to what is going on in the world and growing distrust amongst everyone about the financial situation. So they've come to FFS for support to empower themselves to take direct control over their super via a self-managed super fund, which means that most people are maybe 1, 2, 3 years old, mostly in their journey. So very new, maybe not overly familiar with a lot of the terminology, and certainly a lot of them have invested in bullion. So just
Okay,
that's the
good.
background so that you can frame your answers.
Well, this is as Mary Jane said, I've written 5 books. This was my last one that came out in November. It's been sold out already. That's the new area of family wealth protection, which is really important. It's the same with an SMSF. It's not much good having one if it then ends up in divorce court or family law court. So this is a new book I'm writing, so hopefully it'll be out in July or thereabouts. So again, look at all that gold on the cover. You can't beat that, can you really? So this is my top 50 strategies on how to turbocharge your super, primarily looking at self-managed super funds. So tonight I'm just going to give you a big breakdown on SMSFs. I've been in SMSF since day dot. In fact, I made submissions on self-managed super funds in 1993 when the SIS Act came out, which is the Superannuation Industry Supervision Act, which essentially deals with self-managed. So as Mary Jane said, I've done about 2,000 presentations, probably even a lot more since then. I've advised ANZ, Westpac, NAB, AMP, Combank. So I've advised everyone around self-managed, and I see there's a great opportunity. When I first started, there was, I think, about $11 billion sitting inside self-managed. It's now up to $1.05 trillion sitting in there, and there's around about 600,000 funds. So they're very heavyweight compared to an industry fund or retail fund that might have, $30,000 or $40,000 average balance. Up in a self-managed super fund, the average balances are, quite sizable. So what we're doing there is the smart money goes there. So why is that? I can tell you a lot of people I know have stuck the gun. They've been in the game for a long time and they've done really well. A story that I like to always tell, going back to the early, around about 2010, 2012, I was in Victoria doing a property seminar, and you'll see a little bit later on that, as far as I'm concerned, negative gearing is much better out in a self-managed super fund than outside a self-managed super fund, and I'll go through why that's the case. I'm going to give you lots of tips and strategies and everything to put in place now. So a few ideas and strategies you should be putting in or hassling Mary Jane tomorrow to put them in place before 30 June. Unfortunately, a lot of the stuff gets carried to 30 June. So going to make a difference to your tax position this year. But getting back to the story, so I was at a big property conference down in the Melbourne Convention Centre. There's about 4 or 5 lots of people speaking at the time, if you've ever been to one of those. And I had around about 200 people at mine, and I was talking about, probably not as advanced as some of the ones today, but I was talking to a lot of people about the benefits of negative gearing into super. That's funny because people just don't take my advice. But anyway, at the end of the session, had a gentleman put his hand up, and this is a really good strategy for all of you, and this is something that you can take away and run to the bank for it. He, in fact, put it in place, and it was a strategy that I devised way back in 1998. And essentially, he said, "Look, I've bought a couple of properties in my self-managed superannuation fund, and that I bought a future retirement place. So I'm now retired. I want to sell my existing property, and I want to live in the property, or the property that I bought, which was up on the coast in Victoria. I want to go and live in that." And my accountant said, "No, I can't." And the accountant was right. I mean, you can't, if it's a residential property, you can't go and stay in that property per se. If it's commercial, it's a great strategy to have commercial properties run alongside your family trusts, and paying rent to yourself at a low tax rate. It's a no-brainer. But anyway, I said to him, "Look, the easiest thing to do is sell your property, then go and buy your other property out of your self-managed superannuation fund, because it's in your pension side, so it's tax-free. And in Victoria, you can do it without duty. And then essentially you've now got your sea change property there, and you've got your cash back inside your self-managed super fund." So there's a very simple solution to it. But the nub of the story was, I then asked him, I said, "Oh, obviously you're an experienced SMSF investor. How long have you been in there?" He said, 15 years. I said, "Well, what's your balance inside the fund?" He said, $3 million. I said, "So over 15 years, you've got up to $3 million. He said, "Yep, I've got 3 properties in there." And I said, "Okay, so people who are like you, so we all tend to hang around people who are much like us." I said, "People like you, same sort of investments, all of that sort of stuff. I like that. It's like almost the industry funds, compare the pair, but this one's completely different." I said, "So your friends have invested outside of super in negatively geared property outside of super. You've got $3 million. What sort of amount of money have they got?" And he said, "Oh, around about 2.1. And the difference simply is the taxation. And we're going to go through that for you, and we'll have a look at that, because by age 60, you can effectively be in a tax haven, a legal tax haven in Australia. Now, the Labor government won't like you to say that, but it's there, so take full advantage." Okay, there's four types of funds. First one is the people try to do it themselves. That's a disaster because, you're going to be paying full freight of tax, no strategy, no idea. Primarily, 90% of people go into a self-managed super fund for range investments. Here I did this little picture for you, Mary Jane, a nice little family SMSF with a lot of people sitting with gold bars in there. And that's probably one of the fastest movers at the moment because of people obviously concerned around fiat currency. I had gold in my fund going back about maybe 5 or 6 years ago. Unfortunately, I sold out and put money into my tech company, but that's the benefit of having it. Another big mover probably over the last 3 or 4 years has been crypto. I actually had the first ever SMSF trust deed. So SMSF trust deed is probably the most important document that you'll ever get in your life because it tells you what you can do. Because the superannuation laws that I talked about say what you can't do. So to find out what you can do, you need to have it in the deed because if it's not in the deed, you can't do it. So way back in 2009, I inserted into the SMSFD that I had at that time, and I've recently upgraded it to 2025 to cover that $3 million unearned unrealized gains strategy. So I put inside there, but essentially for that one, going back to 2009, I put in there digital assets, NFTs, and a whole range of other ones. So certainly well and truly ahead of the pack. So when you're going into that, as I said, you can have property, you can have shares, which are great, exchange traded funds, you can have overseas property. There's really not much you cannot have. The key issue, though, is you just got to be very careful about having a related parties such as relatives, children, all that, utilising assets of the fund, except if it's business real property such as commercial property, farms and stuff like that. So DIY disaster, no, standard SMSF. So if you go to an accountant and set up an SMSF, you're going to get this. 2 members, no strategy, short-term thinking. So it's just, well, okay, we're going to do this. So you probably just cut around about 25% of 40% of your potential just going through that one. Family SMSF, I came up with that term, or the family superannuation fund, I came up with that term in 2007 or 2008. Used to be we could only have 4 members in the fund, but we can have 6 members in that fund. So in this one, we got 5, which is okay. So you can actually have those kids sitting in that self-managed superannuation fund. Their grandparents can make contributions on their behalf if they want to. Why would they do that? Well, the money is there. The best time to actually save for retirement actually is at their age. It's not at our age. Because by the time it gets around to 65, it's going to grow quite considerably. When we have the 6 members in the fund, or 5 or 4, we can all do our own separate investments. So a number of funds that I set up, we might have the elder patrons of the fund. It might be more in fixed interest, cash, shares, particularly they'll have quite often like banking shares that give you franking credits, and we'll talk about that. But essentially, we get a tax refund on that, which is brilliant. And we can have the younger kids can actually be borrowing to go into property, or they might want to go into crypto, or they might want to go into gold or whatever. So we want to have a lot of flexibility. I won't have time. I was going to show you how to build an investment strategy, but haven't got the time for that because we're on strategies. But wherever you invest in something, you need to have an investment strategy is required. So
I'm sorry for interrupting you, Grant, but your volume has dropped and everyone's facing that problem. Maybe if you could fix
okay,
that.
can you hear now? So is
Yeah,
that
it's
better?
much better. Much better.
Okay,
Yeah. I'm
sorry.
sorry. But yeah.
I should have got a microphone now, so I'll just talk a little bit louder. Yeah, so once you have your investments in there, you need to have an investment strategy. So Mary Jane can build one for you. We've got ones for crypto, we've got ones for gold, fixed interest, cash overseas, property overseas, bonds, the whole works. But the one that I built in 2018, it's a brand new style, which I like. So it's what we call a leading member discretionary style SMSF. Now, generally, most people will tell you that all members must be trustees or directors of a corporate trustee. Generally, I would, if you've got a self-managed super fund, you must always have a corporate trustee. If you don't have a corporate trustee, you can't take lump sums out when you are retired. So always put in place a corporate trustee. You want a special purpose one. Again, it's something that I've got a lot of estate planning and strategies built into a special purpose corporate trustee. So I know Mary Jane uses all our documents, so yeah, you've got that in there as well. Now, the way it works is that if you've got one member who holds enduring power of attorney, so for example, my wife, I could hold her enduring power of attorney, so I can be a director or a trustee for myself and on her behalf as well. In fact, if we had a look at the whole four there, um, the gentleman could be the person, because we've got two children under 18, he's a parent, so he's their trustee on their behalf. And then the gentleman has got the enduring power of attorney for his wife. So you can actually have one trustee and a four-member fund. Go and tell your accountant that, or apart from Mary Jane, because that would spin most of them out. But what we want to do is this is particularly useful where we've got a six-member fund, because we want to have lines of succession. Because at some point in time, we're going to, and this is the problem with the standard SMSF, that when one person dies or someone becomes mentally incapacitated, we're going to have to bring this into play anyway, and that creates a huge disaster. And we'll talk about that when we get to estate planning.
So
The leading
Grant,
member,
could I just pause here for a sec, because all of our clients, except one who's just upgrading to a leading member, all of them will have the standard SMSF, which is what we've set up for them. So just to answer their question, why didn't we do this in the beginning? Well, it's a new strategy for us, and that's why we've got Grant here explaining the options. And we do actually have quite a lot of sole member SMSFs as well. So just in case you're wondering why you weren't offered this straight away, it's a very new strategy for us. It is available, and we can step you through it. But it may not be for everyone, Grant, is that right?
No. It's just this is particularly suited for the sole member funds. We need to make sure we do some good stuff there, because if they pass away, we've got serious estate planning problems. Not estate planning, we've got serious tax problems, but you're covered anyway. The leading member, again, is just something that this comes from my book, the Family Wealth Protection book, which is around, you saw the cover anyway. It's essentially there. I built it on the British royal family. The one thing about a self-managed super fund, it carries on forever. So we can continue to have members going through, grandchildren, so on and so forth for super, particularly when it's concessionally taxed. So again, there's not that many in Australia. That'd be fair to say, mainly because it's very highly specialised and is built to protect the bloodline, which is fairly important as well. So family super funds, as I said, I came up with that in 2008, and now 2018, came up with the leading member. So again, particularly as people get old, they don't want to be a director or a trustee. It's just crazy. So you want to do that. The other benefit also is, I've heard a few people saying, oh, my accountant said that if I've got a self-managed super fund, I can't go overseas. It's like, well, that's the biggest load of bull I've ever heard in my life. Because if you've got someone who holds your enduring power of attorney in Australia, as long as it's centrally management and control, which it would be the enduring power of attorney, you can go over and live anywhere. You can take a pension. The beautiful thing about it is pension is going to be tax-free where effectively you go and travel around the world. The only thing is you can't contribute to the super fund while you're overseas, but big deal. We can still go overseas. So again, today is I'm showing you some advanced strategies. We've only just dusted the surface today, so I'll see how far I can get, but I'll make sure I give you all these slides anyway. Okay, so let's have a look. First off, what is a contribution? Well, there's no such definition of contribution. A contribution basically is something that your trustee says is a contribution. And again, going back to what Mary Jane's saying, is the different sorts of fund How do we know we've got different sorts of fund? We're going to look at the deed. Remember I said the deed is sacrosanct. That's the rules of the game. They're not enshrined anywhere. And that's why I have different deeds for different purposes, because not everyone wants to drive a brown, Nissan or whatever you want. So let's have a look at a few strategies. So the first thing is that we can make a contribution. Now, contribution, we can actually contribute property in there, but remember, it's got to be business real property. So that could be a farm, an office, commercial. If you're in New South Wales, very beneficial because you can actually transfer it in, and there's only $500 stamp duty. In South Australia, even better, there's no stamp duty. So it's a huge no-brainer for that one. So we can transfer that in. We can transfer shares in. Unfortunately, can't transfer gold in because it doesn't fit within one of the exemptions, but you can buy gold, as I said in there. When we transfer these in, that might throw up a capital gains tax. Now we get down to the real nub of the matter. When the contribution goes in, we choose whether it's tax deductible or whether it's just after-tax money. So there's no limit on, and I'm going to say this 3 times because most people don't. I can sit and talk to accountants, so I'll still not believe it. Whatever you contribute to a super fund, there's no limit on the amount of deductions you can make. So again, if I have a look at that, if I make a contribution to super, there's no limit on the amount of tax deduction that can be claimed. So, for example, if I'm on a salary sacrifice package, or let's say I'm on $200,000 a year, if I want, I can contribute that all to super. I don't have to take any money in my own name. I can put it all to super. Now, it has some different tax consequences, but up front, that means I'm completely out of the PAYG system. So I'm pretty happy about that one. We're going to get to a little bit more strategies around that as well. Alternatively, I can put in after-tax contributions. So that's what we call non-concessional contributions. And they're generally limited to $120,000 per annum. But we've got you'll see down the bottom, there's a thing called a bring forward rule. So I can actually bring forward and make $360,000. So quite often we'll use that when we want to transfer property or shares or a large lump of contributions and really want to max out and get as much money into super as possible. Why we want to do that? Because it's very low tax rate. So essentially we can use that. I'm going to show you, we can use some borrowings, we can use contributions, non-concessional, and we can also use the tax deductible ones to get rid of capital gains tax. So one of the first things you all need to have a look at is between now and 30 June to see whether how much you should make as a tax deductible contribution. I'm going to show you they're not all locked in at all, not all locked in. So just because you've got a deductible contribution going in doesn't mean it has to stay in there. In fact, it can be released within a couple of years. So you get the tax deduction, get any growth on it, stays in the fund, and then you can pull 85% of the that deductible contribution out. So first home deposit, I won't spend a lot of time there, but your kids, if they're making a contribution, so you can have a distribution from a family trust to the kids put it into super, save up $50,000 over 2.5 years. They can pull it out for the first home deposit. So that's a good one. So again, here's the first one that you've just seen there. The money that's gone in for the first home deposit has been tax deductible contributions. Has everyone got that one? So the money that has gone in for the deposit has been a tax deductible contribution. So that's a huge bonus because I'm going to come back to that one. Now here's a really, this is a tasty one for those of you who, between the 40s, 50s, and you've got a parent who's under age 75. So once you're over age 75, unless it's a downsizer contribution, and I haven't got time to talk about that, but have a chat with Mary Jane. If you're switching between houses, you can put in $300,000 into super. at any age, but generally you can only contribute up to age 75, or your employee can only contribute up to age 75. So if I've got a family trust and I'm running a business or a family company, I can employ my father, for example, who might be 67 or 65. And then what I do is I employ them. They can only work, they might only work like 40 hours or 30 hours a month, but I can pay, $150,000 of tax deductible super on their behalf. Well, here I could put in, let's say, $75,000. Now, the benefit for them is that they're already over 65, so they can pull the money out of the fund straight away. When it comes out, it's tax free. So when the money goes in, that's 75K, then essentially from their perspective, it's added, and I'll come back to how this happens, but it's added back to their assessable income, and virtually they'll pay no tax. So what you're doing there is you're really setting up a real family affair where you're using your parents' super and tax brackets to minimise tax on your business. The key thing about that is then that the parents, the grandparents, can actually use that money to pay kids' school fees. So effectively, if you look at the whole way through, you're getting a tax deduction for school fees. I think that most people would be pretty happy about that one as well. Again, you've got to make sure the boxes are ticked. And again, I said the three-year rule. Okay, so SMSFs, and I'm going to come around and look at some strategies. You can borrow. You can actually borrow for property. You can borrow for gold, believe it or not, if you can find a bank, but I'm going to talk to that a little bit later on. So you can borrow for gold, you can borrow for shares. In terms of shares, you can borrow for artwork. What happens is it needs to be a single acquirable property. So a kilogram bar of gold would be a single acquirable property. A retail property, a residential property, same. So they all fit within there. With shares, they need to be a collection. So, if I buy 10,000 BHP, that's collected into a single acquirable asset. So again, it means I can borrow for it. Now, there's a whole range of banks that will lend mainly for the property. They're not going to lend for gold. They're not going to lend for artwork, and they probably won't. There's some that might lend for shares for that one, like installment warrants. So the key thing about it, though, is because you're self-managed super fund protected from bankruptcy, it means that we can't have that asset sitting inside our self-managed super fund. Otherwise, it exposes everything to bankruptcy. So the technique that we do, and this is built in the legislation, is we have like a little mini trust that holds that property. And the reason that is that if the self-managed super fund fails to make the payments, and then the lender wants to have recourse or close down the loan, the only thing they can get is that property. They can't get anything inside the superannuation fund. So that's, again, is a great way to know that your super fund is basically preserved. Lots of second-tier banks will lend. I think the current rates are around about 6.7 or 6.8%. The other one is we can also do related party loans. So for those people who've got family trusts that might have bucket companies with cash in them, you can contribute, you can use that as a related party borrowing. I love it for under 55s because we talked about, remember, we can contribute. So if I want to buy a property, a residential property, I might have the bank borrowing, but I also might put in money myself. Now, normally I might have, for example, a couple of $100,000 that I want to contribute as a non-concessional contribution to, pay off some of the capital. It's much better if I can lend that in there. So it has the same effect. It means that I've got skin in the game. But the big deal there is because once a contribution goes in, generally you can't take it out. Whereas if you've got a loan in there, you can pull it out at any point in time. So look, I'm going through a lot of strategies. While I'm here, the go is if you need any of this or anything is of interest, I've got a few things. You can jump on YouTube, and I've got a lot of videos on YouTube. So that's just at Grant Abbott. or you can go to grantabbott.com where I do a daily blog. So that will keep you up to speed and up to date. And of course, Mary Jane is on top of everything. But if you need to, just make a booking and we can look at your state of affairs and stuff like that before 30 June or after 30 June. Okay, so this is pictorially what it looks like. So I've got a property here. I've got a nice little office building and an office suite up here. So I've got, you know, I'm gonna white collar work. I've got my self-managed super fund that's going to buy that property. So it's going to use the bank's going to borrow. It'll have some money sitting in there. So one of the key things I always tell people in a self-managed super fund, if you're on a retail fund, and I've got a couple of good stories about that, but if you're on a retail fund, basically you're letting other people do your investment. When you're in a self-managed superannuation fund, you take investment control, or more importantly, you've got a really good capital outlay. Remember, that capital outlay quite often has come from concessionally or deductible contributions. So that deposit can be parlayed into, you know, quite a sizable fund. Easiest way to become an SMSF millionaire? Well, if you've got $200,000 between you and your spouse, or $300,000, and then you borrow $600,000 to $700,000, then instantly your fund is worth, you know, your fund is worth $1 million. And I always tell people the thing that you want to do is look at your age, and you want to essentially look for where you think the property is going to be a hotspot at age 70. So, for example, if you're 40 and you're looking 30 years, if you think about now, what are we, 2025? You know, 1995, you know, what would have been the hot spots now? So you're looking at probably Hervey Bay up here, Sunshine Coast, you know, parts of the Gold Coast, plenty of parts in the, you know, regional areas regional beach areas in New South Wales. So again, we can have the bank, or we can do our related party loans, and that could be from a family trust. It could be from a bucket company. It could be from us as individuals. So, for example, if I've got an office building, I'm in New South Wales, I can contribute that into super, but I can take some as a tax deductible contribution, and then I can take some as a related party loan. So that's how I can get, you know, I could get probably a $2 million office building or a commercial property. Remember, it's business property, so I can transfer it into a self-managed super fund fairly easy because I have a related party loan. I did one transaction where a group actually put a $50 million loan on property in there. And those were the good old days, because in those days you could do a 0 interest rate and there were no limits on what you can have. So you can buy it for a factory, farm, office. You can even do it for bed and breakfast, which is a bit more specialized. Just one little segue here. One of the things that everyone's been concerned about, particularly that $3 million, I won't have time to go into it, the strategies, but if you've got more than $3 million, you know, please make sure you meet with Mary Jane, and we'll sort things out pretty quickly. The one thing there, though, is everyone's aghast because essentially it means they're taxing unrealized gains. The funny thing about it is that industry and retail super funds already tax unrealized gains, because what they do is when you invest in a retail superannuation fund, you'll find the unit price has a provision there for capital gains tax on unrealized gains. So they do tax unrealized gains, and they have done right since inception. Okay, negative gearing in a self-managed super fund. Why is it better? And this is a secret that is probably, you know, cost millions of Australians millions and millions of dollars going down the track. So let's go back to our thesis. So if I have and I'm looking at the red here, outside, if I negatively gear, what I do is I use my after-tax money to acquire a deposit. Let's say it used to be 5%, but, you know, it's up around about 20% now. I'll then go and borrow 80% from the bank at whatever interest rates are. Residential property in Australia usually is around about a 2% yield. So it means from a tax perspective, after I pay off my rent, depreciation, which is available on fixtures and fittings in the property, and I get a valuer out for that one, and capital allowances if it's a new property as well, I end up from a tax perspective with a net loss, and that net loss can then be offset against my salary. And so therefore that reduces my PAYG. Problem about that is, one, I've got to save up the money after tax. Secondly, once I've fully paid it off, because essentially we don't use these homes to pay for our kids' school fees, we pay them off over a long period of time for our retirement income. So it's the old monopoly game. Let's build up our properties and, get income. The problem is, once you're 55, 60 or 65, you're sitting in retirement, you're stuck for the rest of your life, because essentially all rent is going to be taxable. And by that stage, you've paid off the loans, rent's a lot higher, and then you're going to be paying tax on the rent. The other side is if you have to sell it, because as you get older, you need to move into a retirement home, or there's a health thing. If you have to sell one of the properties, you have to pay capital gains tax. If you pass it on to the kids are going to have to pay capital gains tax. So all that holding of it, all you're doing is you're just festering this great big capital gains tax sore over time. Someone has to pay the piper at some point in time. Whereas inside a self-managed super fund, remember the deposit. Remember we talked about first home savers? We can use deductible contributions to save up our deposit. So we save that up. So the deposit is actually a tax break. Now that goes into this fund here, and then rental income's taxed at 15%. But again, we might be negatively gearing there. So same thing, exactly the same figures. We might have a tax loss that sits inside this fund. And this is a little bit sophisticated. Some of you might miss out. It's such a thing in Australia where you make a deductible contribution, or your employer puts SGC on your behalf, that the retailer industry funds actually take 15% off the top. Again, another rip-off. They say that's a contributions tax. There's not. Because in your fund, if I make a deductible contribution in here, it's assessable income of the fund, like rent, like interest. So if I've got a loss inside the fund, and remember this comes from my salary, that loss inside the fund is going to reduce my contributions tax liability, which is a huge benefit. Now, the big thing is, once I turn 60 or 65, exactly the same scenario, I start up a pension, and then I move my residential properties over to the pension side, and I have no tax. And I might have accrued $500,000 in capital gains over the holding of my period. As soon as I move over to the pension side, that capital gains tax just goes like that. Whereas these guys, they've got a festering sore each and every year. I lose the capital gains tax. I don't have to pay rent on that rental income. And essentially, I'm much better off always negative gearing in super. Okay, so let me go. Estate plan. Okay.
So Grant, just while I'll give you a moment to have a glass of water. Bansal, oh, you're there, Bansal. Could you just urgently remove those two disruptors in the session? I sent you their names. I don't, or give me ability to remove participants. Yeah,
I'm on it. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Oh, what were they doing, silly sausages?
Oh, we have trolls. We have professional trolls that love to just say silly things and show their intelligence. So just ignore them, everyone.
I want to how many books they've written.
Oh, quite a few about me, I think. But anyway, yeah, back to you.
That's okay. So I'll come around. Let me just do this. I'll come back and do this estate planning a little bit later on. So I'll leave that. For there. So let's go and have a look at. We've had a look at negative gearing, and let's go and have a look at the next slide. So this is a really good one for you for this year. So a couple of strategies. Again, we can put in deductible contributions, and again, they can be shares or managed funds, or they can be cash. As I said, your employer can make deductible contributions. Remember, the one thing is that there's no limit on deductible contributions. Now, what happens in the fund? If you have a look here, I've put $100,000 in, and I've taken a deduction. So that essentially means that $100,000 is going to reduce my taxable income for this year. So that's quite a sizable one. So that goes into the accumulation account. Now you can see up there, let me shut the door. My cat's gone and opened the door. So when I have a look here, so the $100,000 has gone into the fund. So that means virtually, if I could do that this year, then I could go and borrow 80%. I could effectively go and buy a $500,000 apartment straight away. Or, as I said, with that related party loans, you can actually borrow money from yourself, effectively for potentially gold. Now, what happens is there's a thing called, oops, sorry, I'm just getting excited here. There's a thing called a concessional contribution, which is a tax deductible contribution threshold. So every year it's $30,000. Except there's one thing, and again, make sure you get in touch with Mary Jane before 30 June, is that if you haven't used this for the last 5 years and your super balance is less than 500, you can carry it forward and aggregate it. So this $100,000, if you haven't been making deductible contributions, you have no excess concessional contribution. So, you can claim a large tax deduction this year, which can offset capital gains, can offset salary and wage income, business profits, etc. But assuming that we haven't got the advantage of that carry forward, then we've got 100,000 here. We've got this concessional contribution. Now, what happens is I've now got $70,000 excess concessional contribution. So this is a mystery, I can tell you, to everyone, and particularly the accounting fraternity. I've used this strategy for a long time. It's quite effective. So let's say that we make that $100,000, and this will go through. We make that $100,000 in June this year. So what will happen then is we lodge our personal and SMSF returns. So if you're on Freedom Financial Services tax agent lodgement list, so we're going to lodge it around about May 2026. Now remember, this is PAYG. So if for example, if I've taken PAYG out, then I get Mary Jane to lodge my personal return as soon as possible, because I'm going to get a refund back straight away. So I'm going to get money back. So then what will happen is I'll then go down the track. The Commission of Taxation will then marry up the super fund return and marry up the personal return. And I'll say, well, you've got a $70,000 contribution. So what we have to do is we have to add it back to your personal return, and we'll work out what the tax payable is on. So they work out the tax payable, but the main thing is you get a 15% tax offset. They're assuming you paid contributions tax on it. So that's a good thing. So we might have, for example, if this is all we've got, if we're only earning $100,000, then that's $70,000 coming back, because I'd be lodging a nil tax return if I've got $100,000 and I put it all into super. I'll lodge a nil tax return. So then what would happen is the commission would then come and add back $70,000. But tax payable on $70,000 is equivalent to 15% tax offset. So I don't have to pay any tax on that amount of money. The interesting thing is, though, when the commissioner comes back to me in probably about May or June 2026, I've got 60 days when he comes back to actually pull out 85% of that excess concessional. So I've parked the money sitting in there, taken a tax deduction, and then I can pull out, $55,000 virtually within a 60-day period. So again, it used never to work, because Mary Jane will tell you before 2013 there were big like 30% penalties on it, but now there's no penalties. So again, it's a really good strategy. Once you do it, makes a huge difference. And particularly I'm doing it for a few clients that are retiring this year. And so what we're doing is we're flicking it in, because the next one is that we can do, and this is a really important one, if your assessable income is going to go down next year, what we can do with that $70,000, we can still contribute it, but rather than put it into this year, we can shift it into next year. So we use what we call a contributions suspense account. So we push it into next year, which means then we're going out even further into 2027. So we've got a good couple of years deferral. In times of inflation, it's a great little strategy. Now you probably may need to listen to this a couple of times, but have a chat with Mary Jane, do your numbers. If anyone's earning more than $150,000 or $200,000, I've got a high income earner strategy there that you can utilize if you want. Benefit again, once you're age 60, tax-free lump sums as well. Okay, estate planning in a self-managed superannuation fund. One, I've learned from Family Wealth Protection. Certainly, if you get wills done, 99% of lawyers will always direct the super to the estate. The danger about that is effectively that it then gets caught up in potential family provision claims, probate, all that sort of stuff, which we don't want. So the best thing to do is pay out death benefits to a dependent. So what's a dependent? Someone who is our child, whether it's an adult child, whether they're financially dependent or not, our spouse, and also includes anyone who's financially dependent upon me. So when we have our own self-managed super fund, we need to have an SMSF will that says this is what's going to happen with those death benefits. They need to be paid out to dependents directly, which is fairly important. If you're already in pension phase, then what you can do is you can pay out a reversionary pension. So it goes to yourself and then your spouse. And potentially if you've got, because I have seen a number of grandparents who are paying school fees for their grandchildren. So therefore the grandchildren are dependents because they're financially dependent upon their grandparent. So they can become a multi-generational pension, which is tax-free to the grandkids for the rest of their life. Alternatively, in here it will come out tax-free, because the danger there is if you're a sole member, you pass away, and your assets go to your children, there's potentially a 17% tax on it. So again, we've got a few little strategies around that as well. So estate planning is pretty crucial. But I thought I'd finish, so that's about it. But I thought I'd leave maybe 15 minutes for questions there, Mary Jane.
Yes, and before we do that, Bansal, would you mind removing Steve Clungberry from, we have quite a few trolls here tonight. So yes, thank you very much, Bansal. So look, there's so many strategies. They're quite complex, and I'm sure quite a few of our newer SMSF clients will be sort of scratching their heads. This has been recorded. It will be uploaded tomorrow, and I think there might be a link sent out to you later tonight from the admin here. Does anybody have any questions? Oh, there were in the chat. There was a question. There was a few questions not in the chat, in the Q&As. So if we just go to the open ones, I'll just read out. Elizabeth had a first one. Yes, that was the name of the book. Kim has said, I'm keen to hear your thoughts on the proposed unrealised tax gain on the $3 million in super. She hasn't reached that yet, or he, but knows that she will or he will before they retire, which is 20 years until she turns 60. I'm going to say Kim's a she, but it could be a he.
Yeah, so the first thing is never trust the government. So that's the first thing. So what we start off with $300,000 now, or sorry, $3 million now. They'll either leave it there and won't index. So in 20 years' time, $3 million is probably equivalent to $1.5 million now. To be brutally honest, from what I've shown you tonight, so if we go back and have a look at this one, so for people who are investing in shares and you're on the pension stage, remember I talked about the benefits there if you've got a property. But if you've got shares in here, say, CommBank or NAB or whatever in the pension stage, and this was my dad, so I'm a property person and gold, dad was shares, he would receive about $50,000 of cash dividends each year. Now he was in the pension, so he paid no tax. He could buy and sell his shares and he paid no tax. But, and this is a big but for you, attached to those shares were franking credits of around about $23,000. So he paid no tax in the fund, could sell and buy and sell shares and pay no tax. But he would then lodge his return or the fund return as soon as possible after 30 June, because then the tax office would refund him that $23,000. So you're not paying any tax and you're getting a tax refund, which doesn't sound logical at all. Now, around that one, there is, I said in self-managed super fund, there's around about $1 trillion sitting in SMSFs, and they're really starting to make a big impact on the next generation. So the people under age 40, which is fantastic because they certainly like to do their own thing. From that one, what we're seeing though is with the retail industry and self-managed, we're up around about $3.5 to $4 trillion sitting in super, but the whole of the sector only pays, I think it's only around about 16 or $17 billion in tax according to the last budget, which means it's severely under-taxed. So the government's going out of its way to increase taxes, and this unrealised gains is going to happen more often. So what we want to do is when we go down, look at what your investments are, and I'd encourage, I'd always like to see people at age 60 have a couple of $1 million each. So husband and wife or spouses or partners have a couple of $1 million each, because that's going to give you a really good retirement, because all the stuff coming in here is always going to be tax-free. So that's a good start. What it means is that going down the track, we'll end up utilising this sort of structure. I think I've got it here. So we'll be utilising this sort of structure, which is a self-managed superannuation fund and a family protection trust together. So that's another thing that I do that's in the big book. And then we'll be mixing some of our investments here and some here. Now, with a family protection trust, we generally don't need income. So this is where our good capital growth assets are. And we can always sell those assets to the family protection trust. The SMSF can't buy the assets off the family protection trust, but the family protection trust can always sell, buy those assets off the SMSF. So again, we want to have these sort of structures running side by side. But that's bearing in mind that you're going to be in a position of having quite a significant amount of wealth. But once it gets to a certain stage, you want to start building that anyway.
So I'm going to answer a quick question here, which is Mr. Bansal, who here is online and is very rapidly answering some questions. He's actually part of Grant's team in legal back office, who's our legal back office partner. So that's who you might be dealing with for some of the arrangements and the day-to-day. But he's one of Grant's team and partners with us.
Associate, yeah.
Yeah, associate. So that's David's question. Michelle, and this is, I think, not sure if you did cover this earlier. How can I borrow to buy gold or silver within my SMSF?
Well, again, there's not too many banks, I think, that would lend on it, which is a bit of a shame because it's a pretty good asset. Potentially, you may be able to lend the money to the SMSF yourself to buy gold. So when we do that, if we can show out there that someone, so in order to do that, we need to show that it's arm's length. So if we can show that there's someone out in the marketplace lending gold, then we can do the same sort of thing in our SMSF. And I think the interest rate is around about 6 or 7%.
Okay.
Just got to be careful though when you do that. Remember, gold is not an income producing asset. So if you have to because you have to repay that, otherwise, the whole lending falls apart. So that's the only one problem with gold compared to, say, property or shares.
So what you'd want to be looking at then is buying it in sizes that you could sell off a little bit. So let's say if it's increased, say 30% as it has already this financial year, you've got a little bit you can sell it off to make those repayments.
Yeah, and you can always buy like Krugerrands or stuff like that, coins.
Yeah, we wouldn't be looking at Krugerrands. They're not bullion. Don't meet the definition.
Not anymore.
No. But bullion, cast bars is the cheapest way. Or you can buy allocated, unallocated, or even the tokenized version, which is a really easy and cheap and effective way of buying and selling.
Absolutely.
So can SMSFs deploy money in CFDs? Oh, actually, before you answer that, I was listening to something you were talking about the other day, and it said back in the beginning of SMSFs, when you could hold a wide variety of investments, someone had, what was it, a brothel license in their SMSF?
Yeah, no, saw someone in Kalgoorlie had a brothel license. One of the, I forget the horse, it was in the 1990s, won 2 Melbourne Cups. That was in a self-managed super fund, so quite popular to have horses in there. But again, you've got to make sure it's not just for you want to have a decent horse in there. Bull semen I've seen in there quite a bit. Abalone licenses. It's tightened up a lot, but in those early days, it was like a bit like Yellowstone. You know, you can virtually
That's the
come
Wild
to
West.
do whatever you want. The problem with the you have to remember with the brothel license is that you can't utilize the asset in the fund, so you sort of can't go and get a freebie.
A massage. So now,
Wine used to be a really big one in there as well, much the same as gold, but wine going back, I'm not sure if it's so much these days, but people used to have some really good bottles of
yeah,
wine in there.
you
Very
can
precious.
have the wine still these days, but you can't store it on your side, even if it's
Yeah,
closed,
and you
and
can't drink it.
you can't drink it, and you have to have it insured within 7 days. Bang, and it
Yeah,
has a whole lot of too much hard.
rigmarole.
So the CFD, is that the contract for difference? Is that what they're talking about?
Yeah, so that's more like it's like almost like a gambling thing. Yeah, you can do whatever. You can do futures. We're using you could do a lot of people use options. So one of the things that I'm building or looking at building around the unrealized gains is an option strategy, like a butterfly to try and keep a cap on the assets sitting inside the SMSF, then correlating that with a family protection trust. So you can do options, futures, and all that. You just need to do what we call a risk management statement, which Mary Jane can do anyway, because that's part of our investment strategy.
So just we've got a few minutes left. So if my SMSF makes a net gain in a financial year, does it need to pay capital gains tax? If so, is this what this meeting's about? So the SMSF needs to offset that net gain.
Yeah, so if you realize a gain, it's going to depend on where you're sitting. So if you're in a pension phase and the asset's sitting in the pension phase, then you don't pay any tax. If you're in the accumulation stage, then what happens is you're going to have a net gain. That's then reduced by 33 and a third percent. So, for example, if I've got $100,000 gain, it drops down to 66 thousand or $66,700. That's including our assessable income or taxable income of the SMSF. We take off any deductions, and then at the end of the day, after that, we pay tax at a rate of 15%.
And a Rolex, can you have a Rolex in an SMSF?
Yeah, absolutely. But again, it's what you're saying is it's best to that's probably why if you have a look at gold, Rolexes and all that, it's really good to have a vault because they're protected, insured, and all that sort of stuff.
But
So,
and classic cars, but you can't have them in your vault. They have to be somewhere else.
yeah, because the problem is otherwise then you have to bear the responsibility or the onus of showing that you didn't you weren't wearing the Rolex or there. It's generally it's there supposed to be there for your retirement purposes and maximize your retirement. So I've seen classic cars in there as well. And you can probably get away with driving them maybe once every 6 months to keep them tuned up.
No, I don't think you can anymore.
I think well, I tell you what, you could probably swap with another car owner. They could come and do yours, and you could do theirs.
Well,
Actually,
exactly. Yeah.
I had a couple guys that bought two properties off the plan. This was down at Sanctuary Cove, and they both did it in their self-managed super fund. They never stayed in theirs. They went and stayed in their other one. And it's the same thing like pooled investments. So you can buy property in a pooled investment. Just make sure that you never go and stay in that exact same one.
Yeah, so I mean, there's you just have to be really understand it. And look, today I think we've basically focused on some basics for our new SMSF trustees. The gentleman who was asking about the CFD earlier says, would a CFD need to be explicitly specified in the D, or could it be wrapped under derivatives?
No, so yeah, don't worry. My deed's already got CFDs in it.
Yeah, and that's the beauty.
Specifically.
Brand is very much at the bleeding edge of the latest, greatest SMSF deeds,
Yeah.
and we use the whole raft. So if anybody is interested in that concept of a leading member SMSF, upgrading to that, that's something that we can certainly help with. So Justin, the last question here, I think, is, so in that example, the SMSF needs to pay a capital gains on 66K. Should I then be using the net gain to buy more gold or silver to reduce the capital gains?
No, that's not going to reduce the capital gain, because the only way you reduce the capital gain is with a deduction or a capital loss. So buying the gold won't do that. One way you can do that is the government, and this is, like, I've used this because I've set up a couple of tech companies. You can buy an early stage innovation company, but just be mindful of the risk. But where they do capital raise, so the money that you invest in there, you get a 20% tax offset, which is quite useful. So compared to a capital gain, so if you had $50,000, you get what's that? So 20%, you get $10,000 tax offset, which is going to be more than the capital gain.
So the very, very last one, and I can answer this, Michelle. Should you be keeping silver and gold other than at my place? So if you're asking where you should keep silver and gold, that's up to you, where you feel the most secure to keep it. If you feel like Cass felt at one stage that banks and vaults were not secure, definitely you can have them in a safe in your house, or in a hole in the ground in your back garden, or somewhere that's secure for you. But there are lots of options. There's, the vault, the big private vaults. There's allocated, unallocated, which is you're using a bullion dealer's vault, and in some cases you don't even have to pay for voltage, which is great. Where you should do it is your choice. No one can tell you that other than you. You just have to undertake that you feel that it is being held securely for your SMSF. Now, just to wrap this up, I want to thank Grant very much. It was full of so much information that our heads are falling off. If you'd like to specifically discuss anything here, then reach out to me. A lot of you are our clients, so your primary point of contact up until now will be Peter, Peter, P-E-T-A. She's our lead SMSF accountant and has been working with you up until now on your strategies on various things. Grant has kindly offered to help even bring it out to the next generation and help with this. So whether we talk to Grant first or Grant talk to Peter, or we're just going to work that out in the background. But we will be definitely following up on your SMSF questions, investment strategy questions, those sorts of things. But really importantly, this may have raised the concept of, gosh, I'm building my wealth. How do I protect it going forward? There's a lot of people getting really sick really suddenly. My poor neighbour down the road, 85, got one of those turbo cancers. It's terrible. A lot of people sort of falling off their perch suddenly. So this is really a good time to start thinking about, if something happens, even if you just get sick and you're incapacitated, who do I have in that succession of my SMSF that's going to be looking after my hard-earned staff, that's going to be looking after me for the rest of my life, and then for my generations to come. So if you want to talk about that and look at possibilities, just send me an email and I'm happy to follow up on that. There's a lot of really interesting strategies that can make it easier for you, because I'll tell you what, those litigators out there are sharks, and it's not going to get better.
And the politicians are just going to make it worse for us all, I can tell you.
Yeah. So look, thanks very much, Grant.
That's my pleasure.
We will make sure that this is available to everybody on our website. There is a YouTube link, and we'll make sure it's up there. If you have other questions that you do want to have answered in person, that you want to jump on our next live, it will be with Cass and myself on Wednesday, the 14th of May at lunchtime, because we like to mix these things up. It's 12:30. Again, the event details are on our website. And then if you happen to be up near Jimboomba in Queensland, I'll be up there in the middle of June, June 13. I think I'm visiting somewhere with Ainsley Bullion. We're going to do another free, chat about all sorts of things, ideas in uncertain financial times. So that's what we're all about, and that's why we do these things. And we're so pleased that Grant and his team is partnering with us. We're all about education. It might feel really hard at the beginning. Your heads might be swimming. It does get easier, just one little step at a time. Grant, any last
Okay, good. Yeah, I think a couple of things that I'm doing is if you go to grantabbott.com and just log in, so there's no cost, but you get a daily blog, and I'm now recording my family wealth protection book. So rather than doing it through Audible and making money, I'm going to release it there over time. So it's going to be free because I know I'm like that. I like to listen to podcasts and stuff like that. Not many of us read anymore. That's why. Like, if you see some of my webinars and stuff like that, the highly technical ones, they go 3-4 hours now. I'm having to condense them into a minute, but that's okay.
And on that note, if you are interested in the Dummies Guide 101 to Asset Protection Estate Planning, you might not even know what asset protection and estate planning even means. Michael Sims from Millions March will be interviewing Grant on a Friday, the 30th of May at 7 p.m. in the evening. It'll be a Facebook Live, then we'll download it and save it. Stay tuned. I will be putting some information out about that soon. But Michael Sims is my great partner in crime over the last 5 years. That's probably where all those trolls came from today, from that body of work. They love to bring us down, but we don't. We've got very thick skin. But Michael Sims is a very average, normal, smart, very smart, but asks all those questions that will really help you get your head around it. So
that's great.
Yeah, looking forward to that. All right, thank you very much. I think it's time, 7 minutes over. That's not too bad.
Perfect.
All right. Good night.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye.